promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Richard Kroll. Kroller, how are you, buddy, on this beautiful day?
Good, wee. It is a beautiful evening, that is, on a wonderful week here in Philadelphia. We finally have spring has sprung. By the way, is that new music? I felt like I was cruising in on a small canoe in Aruba.
Yeah, that's why. It was a beautiful day. I went with the... And by the way, all of our show music, it's on our show notes, but all of our show music is provided by the new U. U is spelled E-W-E, stands for the Eric Weaver Experience. So my brother Eric and my brother-in-law Chris and several other great musicians provide our music for the show, and we thank them for that.
By the way, I never told you this, but I love plays on words with the word U, E-W-E. In fact, the Rams cheerleaders are called the Embraceable U's.
Is that true?
It's true.
Wow, I didn't know that. And EWE, U, is not used much in our vernacular.
We don't use it enough, actually.
Cool. Well, we have a great show and entertaining show, as always. I first wanted to run something by our audience. We have some people that have contacted us and offered to help support the show. And we want to grow the show, but we also want to stay close to our original concept. One of the ideas we have is to have a business sponsor each show. And by the way, the demographics for people that listen to podcasts are affluent and educated. So if that's something you might be interested in, talking about show sponsorship, or you know someone who has a small business or whatever, please go to our website. There's a tab there, supporting listeners, and just email supportinglisteners@areweidiots.com, and we'd love to talk to you about that. So keep that in mind. We're trying to grow the show, and we'd love to have your help.
But the podcast hosts aren't necessarily affluent and educated.
Although we're trying.
We are trying.
We're willing to learn, as Bill Murray said in Stripes. Okay, this week's agenda, as always, our Idiot of the Week awards. I have some great nominees.
I'm looking forward to it.
I might have outdone myself with these two nominees. Then we're going to talk about inequality. We teased that last week, and it's been in the news a lot over the last several years. Certainly in the 2016 election, Bernie Sanders made a campaign theme of it. And then we're going to conclude the show with another When We Were Idiots segment. Rich has got he's guaranteed me lots of laughs on this story. That's guaranteed, right?
You know, the audience is starting to see a pattern where it's only me doing the When We Were Idiots segments.
Well, you said I was boring, so maybe maybe that's following through on my lack of stories, right? There's good to go with boring too.
Yes, there is.
All right, Richie. So I have some good ones here, and maybe I build it up too much, but so listen to this. Nominee number 1, and there's 2 people here. According to a new study in pediatrics, it's ethically inappropriate for government and medical organizations to describe breastfeeding as natural because the term enforces rigid notions about gender roles. Quote, coupling nature with motherhood can inadvertently support biologically deterministic arguments about the roles of men and women in the family. For example, that women should be the primary caretaker, the study says. Referencing the natural in breastfeeding promotion may inadvertently endorse a set of values about family life and gender roles, which would be ethically inappropriate. So these authors, Jessica Martucci and Anne Barnhill, flaming progressives.
Flaming is the word.
This is to the extent, the conclusion of the study, this is to the extent they jump. If doing what is, quote, natural is best in the case of breastfeeding, how can we expect mothers to ignore that powerful and deeply persuasive worldview when making choices about vaccinations?
What?
So basically, first of all, they're blasting that mothers, you can't say natural with breastfeeding, and I don't know. To me, I don't see anything wrong with that. But
It may be the most natural thing in the history of mankind.
and every species does it, whatever. But then they go on to say that if they believe that just doing things naturally, that might lead them to not use vaccinations because it's not natural. I mean, that's the leap that they took for this.
So this might be the actual epitome of microaggressionism stupidity.
You love that term. I'm glad I turned you on to that
You
because
did
you're
turn
going
me
to use
on
it
to
the rest of your
that.
life.
I use it every show because I do realize how many idiots are out there trying to be ultra politically correct to a fault.
I got an idea.
What?
We're gonna sell T-shirts. Let your inner microaggressionist out.
I like it.
So,
I
what do
like
you
it
think
a
of
lot.
Jessica and Ann and their
I don't
study?
even know if we have to go any further.
Okay, we'll
So
go.
they're heavily in the lead.
I might top it though. Okay.
It's going to take Usain Bolt like nominee to pass them.
All right. So here's the second one, and I've noticed I have a propensity to pick out people that were drunk. A man walks into Little Caesars, buys a pizza, and walks back out to his car. It happens every day, right? What does not happen every day is a man driving away on only 3 tires and getting busted for operating a vehicle while intoxicated. According to Canton, Ohio police, Joshua Milkovich, 28, was missing a tire as he drove his car on a Sunday night. Police say they got several calls from concerned citizens who were worried he had gotten into an accident. Police found him on the whatever block of Mount Vernon, his car broken down. He was charged with OVI. And I'm breaking a cardinal rule of podcasting and radio, but I'm going to have to show Rich the picture of the car. For the listeners, not only is it missing a tire and a wheel, it has the whole front end caved in.
It's missing the entire front bumper
Grill.
and quarter panel
and grill.
and grill. The only thing that's covering the engine is a hood.
He was driving this to get a pizza at Little Caesars.
Just a little Sunday drive.
How polluted do you have to be? I know I've asked that before.
Wow, I didn't think he could outdo our
those are your
happy
nominees, Richie.
breastfeeding naturalists.
So how say you?
I think you outdid yourself. I'll tell you why. In defense of the women trying to be politically correct, I'm sure they're nice gals, although they're at a 9.9. If the listeners could see that picture, it's a 9.999. What's it? Stankowitz? What's this guy's name?
Milkovich,
Milkovich
Drunkovich.
wins by a nose.
Yeah, I've noticed that I've picked out at least 3 or 4 idiots of the week where the winner was pollutedly drunk. Is that a word? Pollutedly?
Pollutedly. If not, it should be.
It should be.
I'll send the $1 to his favorite charity.
Thank you. All right, so we're shifting gears to talk about inequality. And as I like to do, Rich, I'm going to preface it with just framing the discussion a little bit. So obviously, most fair-minded people, when we say inequality, we're not talking about the value of a human life. Everyone's life is the same value. We're talking about economic inequality and the difference between outcomes and opportunity. And, I think for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to talk about this problem, if you call it that, in the U.S., because globally, lots of things have gotten better over the last 20 or 30 years. I looked up the statistics. 127,000 people a day have been lifted out of poverty. Between 2000 and 2012, the number of people globally that live in abject poverty fell in half. Infant mortality is down. Diseases that have killed thousands are being eradicated. The Bill Gates Foundation has a lot to do with that. Fresh water is more plentiful. So in a lot of ways, the global population is in a lot better shape. But in the U.S., since the 80s, really, middle-class wages have been stagnant, and that's adjusted for inflation. And we talked on prior shows about the really poor financial condition of many U.S. households, and middle class and lower class folks, their net worth has not kept up with the people that are in the upper income quintile, and it's a problem. And populism is on the rise. Bernie Sanders really used this as campaign theme.
Do you know you bring up Bernie Sanders quite often?
I do, because I think he's the epitome of the progressive movement and the far left movement, and I think he's actually a pretty powerful guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he runs again. But last comment, and then I'll let you go. I think the problem is, and all the problems that we talk about on this show are typically very difficult. The problem is, I think most people have an innate sense of fairness in them, and no one likes to see, people sleeping on the street or people that are struggling. No one likes that. Even if you're wealthy, you don't like to see that. So I think there's this built-in fairness, and equality seems like a great idea, but it really isn't, and we can talk more about it. But any initial thoughts?
Wow, I have a lot. This is a deep one.
Go
And
for it.
My wife, Jill, always reminds me that I bring up something ad nauseum. Do you know how to spell that?
I do. Like, it's a little Latin. You're throwing some
I'm
Latin
throwing some
in
Latin
here.
out there. I bring up the same comment whenever I travel, whenever I drive into a city, because if you get outside of our own little self-absorbed bubbles, and you and I have it pretty good, and a lot of our friends have it pretty good, and you do see these homeless people, or you do see somebody, with an extreme disability in a wheelchair, or just somebody struggling, or somebody, maybe they have no parents, maybe they're
Right.
foster kids, et cetera, et cetera. They're just broke, and they're good people, and it's not their fault. Or maybe, a war vet with, post-traumatic stress disorder, whatever the case may be. I always say to myself, and I say to my wife, how did they become them? Right? It all starts with the miracle of who we are. Right? And that could be a whole nother topic.
Right.
But for me, it's fascinating. As I drive by that person, I still have my nice little cozy life. That person's stuck. And sometimes I go back, I'll hand somebody $20, but I get to drive away and they're still stuck in their life for the next however long. And it drives me pretty insane thinking about, why is that person them? Why are we who we are? And then the different random luck or bad luck of nature where we have no control over who our parents are, where we're born, what country, inner city, suburb. And that's the luck of the draw. When you wake up
Right.
one day, you are who you are. And a lot of that just is good or bad luck, which leads to, are you going to be affluent? Are you going to be middle class? Are you going to be impoverished? Are you going to be disabled? Are you going to be mentally disabled? And that's where it all begins. And that's why this is a tough one to tackle.
It's a real tough one, and it's a difficult subject. And I think, a lot of people think, well, no one if you believe in free market capitalism, that it's probably been the best system yet devised by man to lift people out of poverty. That's all true. And most people agree that that's going to result in unequal outcomes. But what a lot of people strive for is equal opportunity. And that's where I think it's really challenging, because I don't think there is any such thing. Because like you mentioned, you and I grew up in the same town, right? We probably had similar type of, quote, opportunity from afar. But there's so many other variables. You could have mental illness in your family. Your parents could be abusing you that no one would know about. I'm not saying us. I'm just saying just people in general. There's so many different variables. It's a multivariate problem, I guess is the way I'm trying to say it. And there's so many factors that contribute to whether someone's a success or be able to support themselves or thriving or not. And, I think a lot of people want to bring it down to, it's there's racism in society, or greedy corporate people there. Or government handouts, or whatever it is. There's always these soundbite reasons of why things happen, but it's really much more complicated.
So let's segment this a little further down so we can tackle part of the problem. I think there's two categories. So if you look at the folks that need help, you have the folks that really do need help, good people trying hard, bad luck. And then you have the folks that may need help, but they're sure not trying. They're taking advantage of a system, the Bernie Sanders far left, pay for everybody's house, pay for everybody's car, pay for everybody's health care. And we brought this up in a prior show and even personal discussions. If I'm given free handouts, why wouldn't I take them? Right. And now it gets into the laziness or lack of motivation or lack of work ethic. that helps manifest the problem and make it worse. But there have been attempts in history, and there still are, to try to eliminate poverty and kind of make everything middle ground, socialism, communism, right? And
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and here's why. So the communism premise was, listen, everybody gets the same type of housing, everybody has the same type of pay, everybody has the same type of everything, and the government will manage that with an iron fist. Right. What invariably happens is they manage that down to poverty. They actually put the majority of people in poverty, and only the government officials, the communists, the dictators, and the elite take all the wealth, and there's a huge gap. It was meant to be creating a massive middle class. Instead, it ultimately creates a massive lower class. So we know that doesn't work.
And I would even say some of the most mass murdering regimes of all time, Russia with Stalin and the Mao dynasty in China, where some estimates are there was 100 million people between those two totalitarian, communist regimes, where you were just executed if you didn't agree with the government. There was in Ukraine, there was 6 million people that died because of starvation. So I think most people would agree, although I shouldn't say that, because a lot of people that are millennials now are saying that they would like to try socialism, and these are people that weren't born during
They have no idea what they're talking about.
Exactly. So let me
Some professor at some holier than thou university.
Not St. Joe's, though.
No, St. Joe's is a great Jesuit institution that I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But I would think when you're a young mind and you're influenced by people that propagandize, you're going to have all these millennial thoughts.
I have some quotes from Bernie Sanders, which I'll like to get into. But I wanted to also bring up one other thing, like from a bigger picture. I don't think a lot of people out there think about, when you think about why is it that the American middle class has eroded? Well, think about it in the last 70 years since World War II. World War II, Germany, Britain, France, Japan, a lot of the industrial bases were totally destroyed by the war. After the war, the U.S. was largely untouched, obviously Pearl Harbor the exception, and we had a huge advantage on the rest of the world from a manufacturing base. And so a lot of this utopia that people remember of middle-class families, manufacturing base, it was because our competition was severely limited. So it took till about the 70s or 80s before those other countries rebuilt their manufacturing base, and then they started to compete with us, and then global communication got a lot better, and airplane travel got a lot better, and people could start putting factories overseas, and then the repetitive jobs that could be automated or shipped to where there's lower cost labor, they left. And that's what bugs me a lot about Trump. We didn't get the chance to talk about last show or 2 shows ago whenever we talked about him, is this promise of bringing all these jobs back. It's just not going to happen. They've been automated away or they've been moved because of lower cost of capital. And I don't think people think about that with inequality. There's a reason behind it. That's big picture stuff.
That's big picture 3.0. I don't even know if it's in the books yet. But if you look at what's happening in the United States with automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, it's actually taking, I think I've said the word actually like 9 times today, but it's actually taking away a lot of jobs that used to be done manually.
Right.
And now there's a fear that unemployment rates will eventually start to go up because of there's robots doing the jobs. But
that's nonsense. That's been proven over and over again. They said that the blacksmiths, got put out of job when the car came on board. The computer people, the secretaries, the bank tellers, they all went out. New jobs are always created when technology evolves.
I see a future where the Terminator becomes real.
I love that. That was a great movie. And that was one of the few movies, by the way, I'm really going off topic. That was one of the few movies where the sequel was as good as the original.
Just as good as the original. Cyberdyne.
I love it.
Anyway, so listen, this problem, hey, I have a lot of friends on both sides of the fence, blue collar, white collar, middle collar, and sometimes we get into debates about, the blue collar folks talk about, hey, white collar, right wing elitists, I should be making as much money as you, but I didn't go to college. I went to a trade school, or I started working when I was 18 or 19. Don't I deserve what you do? And that's just not
No.
how it works.
Yeah, no, you don't deserve it. And this is what I have some stuff from right off from Bernie Sanders' website. I know you must think I hate this guy, but
I think we should do a show on Bernie Sanders. I'm starting to think you like the guy.
he's very dangerous. And here's there was 13 of them. I'll just read a couple of them. We must come together and reduce income and wealth inequality by demanding that the wealthy and large corporations pay their fair share of taxes. I have a comment on this fair share, which they always use. Making tuition free at public colleges and universities throughout America. Everyone in this country who studies hard should be able to go to college regardless of income. Guaranteeing health care is a right of citizenship by enacting Medicare for all single-payer health care systems, but yada, yada, yada. And the only one I agree with here, it says breaking up huge financial institutions so that they are no longer too big to fail. That was actually a George W. Bush problem that Obama continued. We actually bailed out the banks in the financial crisis because it was going to, quote, pull down the whole system. Well, to me, that was a moral hazard, and I think it was absolutely the wrong thing to do in a free market. You socialize losses, but we won't get into that. But everything that he says in here costs huge amounts of money.
Our deficit just tripled if he ever gets elected.
And he's never done the math. You're a math guy. I think I'm a math
You're
guy.
becoming a math guy. I'm helping you with that.
But he just hasn't done the math. I mean, it just doesn't work. When he says, invest, he means tax the wealthy people their, quote, fair share. I've never heard someone answer, what is the actual fair share? What percentage of someone else's wealth does Bernie think he's entitled to?
The only thing I would agree to if he said it differently was not allowing wealthy individuals or corporations to avoid, get out of through legal loopholes, tax they should be paying. We know there's millions, possibly billions of dollars that the government should be collecting that we are not. So if we could tighten that up. But as far
Well, we
as
have laws for that. It's called fraud, or
it doesn't work all the time. Or ship your, have your company headquartered out of Delaware, or ship all, out of Ireland. And there's a lot of ways to get around stuff.
Yeah, but we do that all the time. Within the U.S., different states, Texas has no state tax, Florida has no state tax. So people move from California to Florida. Rich people move because they save 12%.
So here's an idea I heard
What's wrong
before
with
that
that?
I loved.
Okay.
A flat sales tax across everything.
I love it.
So, and you could even make it say 8%, whatever the
Because
number
it's
is.
consumption based. It's more
It's
fair.
consumption and proportionate. So,
Right.
if I buy a Hyundai for 10 grand, I get taxed $800.
Right.
If I buy a Porsche for 80 grand, I get taxed, 8,000, whatever.
Right.
If I buy $1 million house, so everybody then is equally taxed. I think that's the greatest idea I ever heard.
I totally agree. And most people that have done tax analysis, I may have my numbers wrong a little bit, but it's anywhere from a flat tax, it could be 14 to 17% range for a flat tax. But if you did a consumption tax, it could be even lower because the people that make more spend more. And so I'm up for that because this current system is rigged for all special interests. So
Can you call Bernie Sanders and get him to add that one?
I really think, I don't know. I think Bernie, has a lot of people because back to what I said at the beginning, there's an innate sense of people wanting things to be equal. I don't know where that comes from. Is it evolutionary biology or whatever? But I think that most people think that way. The problem is when you start to look at the actual solutions, they don't work. We've talked about
Well,
several of
everybody wants to be good-looking, tall, strong,
Like
smart,
you.
athletic.
you just happen to be born that way.
I used to be that.
And Studley.
I'm none of the
Don't
above.
forget Studley.
I was Studley.
You haven't mentioned it this show.
No, I now I'm just a bald, fat, blind, deaf. I can't even see you from here, by the way.
I pulled out one quote which I love. America will endure until Congress discovers it can bribe the public with the public's own money. And maybe Bernie read that a long time ago and that developed his worldview. But I really think that there's a danger, and we've talked about the deficits on prior shows. But if people start to feel like they're entitled to these things as part of their citizenship without any consequence or without doing the math or without figuring out that other people will be disincentivized to create wealth and capital, that's the beginning of the end. So any final thoughts as we conclude the inequality subject?
Listen, I think one of the ways to help inequality is for people that are doing well to step up from a donation standpoint. I personally, I'm not going to trumpet what I do, but I think we should all give money where appropriate to help great causes. And there's so many out there, whether it's health-based, poverty-based, education-based. So if we all just gave an extra $1,000 a year for anybody making a decent income, that would help. And there's so many great organizations out there.
Well, there used to be a lot more.
And there used to be a lot more.
Yeah, there used to be mutual aid societies, the Red Cross, all these VFWs, those things all originated back before there was all these government programs, which we talked about on the prior show as well, starting in the 1920s or so, and FDR, and Johnson, the Great Society program. So there's been this long-term 70-year, 80-year, 100-year window where government has grown and replaced a lot of these private organizations and personal charity, which, people say, well, people won't give. Well, they used to. It used to work great.
People want to give. Listen, sometimes we come up with topics and I think, how can you or I or any individual make a difference? And some people don't vote because they think their one vote doesn't matter. Here's a situation where every individual could help somebody else by just donating more money and to good causes. That's something we can all start today.
Yeah, and I would challenge the people who are cynics about what we're saying to say, well, do you think the government's doing a good job with the money we give them now? Answer, no. Final thoughts from me would be, the one thing I will say, other than the bailing out the banks, that people have a right to be, to gripe about, is that when financial problems happened, and 2008 was the latest, what the response was by the federal government was from the Federal Reserve to reduce interest rates to zero for quite a long period of time. And that benefits people that own assets. So if you're in the underclass and you don't own assets, stock market's gone up for basically 10 straight years. Housing prices have recovered. So if you own assets, houses and stocks are the most common ones, businesses as well, the people that own assets are benefiting from government policy because, truthfully, that's the only thing they got. And the Federal Reserve, penalized savers because they couldn't get any interest there on their savings, so they had to take risk and put it in the market, which inflates stock values and company values. So government policy does affect inequality to the negative, I think, and that's my anti-government. That's my libertarian.
If I could get the Libertarian Party to nominate you, I would vote for you, and I could get up to 500 people to vote for you.
At least I could win one. I could win one township,
maybe a township.
Okay, so we're going to move on, and we're going to move on to the When We Were Idiots segment. Rich has a hilarious story. At least that's what he tells me. So I'm looking forward to hearing.
I'm sure you are. And audience, listen, it's not the case that I'm the only one with idiot stories. It's just Mark can't tell a story that's funny or interesting, so I always have to step up here. Anyway.
We already said I'm boring. I don't have that many stories.
I'll keep letting everyone know that.
I have a story about economics. How's that?
We'll lose half our viewers in 2 minutes.
All right. Lay it on me.
My second job out of college, I'm working for a company called General Binding Corporation. They make all sorts of customized marketing supplies and marketing equipment to actually make notebooks and presentations and all sorts of cool stuff. And one of the categories was laminators. You know what a laminator is,
I do.
Right?
I can't spell it, but I know
I'm
it.
sure you can't spell it. For you folks, everyone knows what a laminator is, right? It's a big piece of machinery that heats up two pieces of vinyl that's very sticky, and it creates a nice coating like you might have on a license or on a menu or whatever. So I'm doing really well at this company. And I come up with this brilliant idea for Mobil Oil that was complaining about, when I used to sit down asking about their use cases and things there, a guy said, we have an issue with our guys going out into these actual oil fields with notes and charts and diagrams, and invariably these things get pretty messed up from actual oil, and they get destroyed, and it's a real problem. And the light bulb goes off, and I say, laminator. So everyone's all excited. So I have a ride with that day. My manager at the time, Rich Ritacco from Long Island, a studly little wrestler, says, hey, we have to have ride with days, which means one day a month you go with a fellow rep and you go out in the field together and see if you can learn from each other. So Colleen Lynch, great gal, goes out with me into the field to go to Mobil Oil. Now, it's August. It's about 100 degrees out. The first mistake I make is I don't have a car that can fit the laminator with air conditioning, because you normally need a dolly.
Right.
These things weigh 120, 150 pounds. Somebody had the dolly, somebody had the van, so I'm like, oh, crap, I got 15 people that want to see this demo. I have no choice. So I picked the thing up, put it in my trunk. I get to Mobil Oil, and it was, you're probably familiar with the 202 corridor with a lot of businesses, and in this one business complex, there's no parking in front of the front door. I have to park about 100 yards away. So she starts laughing because she sees what's coming. I pick up the 150-pound laminator, and I walk it 100 yards in a suit.
So why don't you just drop it off at the front door and then go park?
I don't know why. This is part of the idiot story. So that's variable A.
Okay.
Part idiot A1 there. I carry this thing to the front door, and now I'm sweating bullets.
Yeah.
I mean,
And once you start, it just keeps coming.
And then I'm getting a little nervous, like I must look like an idiot because I have pools of sweat, underarm, neck. I already look unprofessional and horrendous. We get into the meeting, I set it up, and people are looking at me like, this is our rep. So I say, okay, folks, let's start the demo. People are feeding me all sorts of different materials they want laminated. I'm getting into it. I'm feeding them through the machine. Colleen's taking them out the back
And isn't
end.
there heat generated from this process too?
There's more heat being generated, so I'm literally sweating on the laminator machine. And I get so into it, I lose concentration or spatial reasoning. And my new, beautiful yellow knit tie gets caught in the laminate.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
I go to grab it, but this stuff is the stickiest stuff in the world.
Right.
And I can't get my tie off, and it's going deeper in,
You
and
don't have
deeper
scissors
in,
or anything,
and
right?
deeper in. And I'm trying to pull my tie, and it gets to the point where I'm going to get sucked into the machine.
Right. Yeah.
Like an Indiana Jones movie. And I'm trying to find the on and off button. I can't find the on off button. I'm
Go
sweating.
unplug it.
I go, Colleen, panic, pull the plug. So she runs over to the wall, pulls the plug out. I got 15 people staring at me like you wouldn't believe. And I'm all the way stuck with my neck into the laminator, my tie halfway stuck in the laminator.
Anyone got scissors?
And no one's helping me. And then with a very self-effacing, low voice, I say, Colleen, can you hand me a pair of scissors? Now, she's hysterical laughing, but she's trying to be professional. And she walks up to me. Her face is burst red. Her cheeks are puffed out. She's laughing. I can see her heart pumping, and she hands me the scissors. I cut the tie off. I stand back up, and I try to recover. And I say, folks, listen, that can happen, right? But you see how easy it is to stop the machine and prevent injury. And I turn the machine back on, and out
your
comes
tie
the
gets
different
laminated.
charts. And then out comes my yellow tie at the very end.
You should have saved that.
Well, what happened was, so she's at the wall. She wouldn't even come back. She's still at the wall after she plugged it in with her back.
Probably still laughing.
She's hysterically laughing. She's actually crying. I finished the demo.
Oh, my goodness.
And they did end up buying it from me.
Oh, there you go. You'll do anything for a sale. That was the beginning of your sales career.
Worst sales call I ever had that ended up being a positive sales call.
Oh, my goodness. That's a start. You said
I
I
thought you
never
might have heard
had
that
never
one,
heard
no?
that story. That's a great one. Oh, my goodness. I've had some sales stories, but nothing like that. All right. Thanks, Richie. And make sure you tune in next week, everyone, when we talk about the K through 12 education in the U.S. Something I've been wanting to do for a while. We talked this week at some level about equality of opportunity. And I think anyone who knows anything about the districts, the school districts, even within a few miles of each other, they vary greatly. There's a huge chasm between public school districts, and of course there's private schools. So we're going to talk about the K through 12 public education next week. And with technology advancements, are they really current? Or is this really the best we can be? So there's going to be a lot of discussion around that next week. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.